What you just saw was the average blind hunter experience, or blunter for short. That's the memo of this build. You're spreading around so much blind that if the thing you're fighting doesn't have their retinas burned into the back of their skull, you're doing something wrong. Let's get into the build. Also rock. I can do rock. Here's the quick build. Flow State, Ascension, Flashbang, Disorienting Blow, Gambler's Dodge, Spark of Beacons, Frequency, Discharge, Resistance, Ions. Here's your mod setup. Supers Arc Staff or Gathering Storm, that's exotic dependent though, and your exotics are extremely flexible. It's in probably the most flexible list I've been able to recommend for a build. Weapons need to be arc, and look for guns that have arc verbs like Jolt or Blind. Alright, best way I can describe what the build does and how it does it is that we've become very inspired by our Crayola eating relatives because we're running in and punching stuff. Just with a side of Hunter flashiness added on top, and with the goal of spreading blind to everything and everyone. So much of this build and playstyle has been made possible from buffs that the subclass has recently received, and the biggest glow up in the build has been Disorienting Blow. It'll still lock onto a single target, but now it'll deal AoE damage around the target you bob with it, and anything that gets caught in the AoE gets blinded too. On top of that, it'll also give you a few bulk charge stacks, and immediately gives you Amplified. So a really stacked up ability as far as what it does. Although buffs don't stop there, the other part of this build that's been tuned up in two ways is Ascension. It'll now fully inherit the function of your dodge, and as we've got Gambler's Dodge in this build, you get a melee reset, but it now also comes with 3 fragments on arc. As for what it does, in all seriousness though, it'll shoot out some damage and jolt beneath you and makes you amplified. Second aspect's Flow State, where on killing a jolted target you get amplified and get all of these bonuses. The big one being this, in that this amount of extra class ability regen by itself puts our dodge cooldown at around 10 seconds, making Ascension super spammy, but also makes it so that it's guaranteed to refund its own cooldown on being used, as in it'll give amplified, and as that's the trigger for the bonus regen from Flow State, it'll always be back to fully charged from using Ascension. It's also worth mentioning that Amplified, which we've got super easy access to through Flow State, Ascension, Disorienting Blow, and just landing kills on Arc 2, will give you a 15% damage resist, and enemies are also way less accurate shooting at you, alongside all the blind going on too, and this is what makes up your survivability in the kit. Running fast and blinding's the name of the game. Now, one of the things I love about this build is how insanely exotic flexible it is. So much of the build is coming just from the subclass that the exotics can be whatever you're feeling or whatever you need for an encounter. So any of these will genuinely slide right into the setup and feel great. I've got some favourites though, being these. Big damage arc staffs, fast charging supers that can refund themselves, and bonus super regen on killing arc debuffed enemies, cough cough blind. Jolt enemies, free 50% damage resist, and land a melee or finisher and get the highest weapon damage bonus in the game and never reload. Seriously, this exotic's underrated, and of the setups, this is by far the best Spark of Beacons user. But any of these will also work, so go mix and match. There's a couple solo jams on the channel showing off these exotics, and I plan on slowly getting through the rest of these too, to show you they all sit on pretty equal footing. For your fragments, there's a few musts here. First is Beacons for blind on special and heavy arc weapon kills, plus its requirement of being amplified to trigger blind is basically always online. The only time I would ever switch this was if I was running an arc exotic primary, and even then, it'd still be a hard sell to make me take this off. Protection's next. This is just straight up a 25% free damage resist when surrounded, so play the build properly and it's going to be there. And Frequency makes it so that whenever you get Bolt Charge while amplified, another stack is added on top. The last two are flexible, but I've gone for the 2 Ionic Trace Makers in Ions and Discharge, as it gets us back our blinding abilities much quicker. And Super can be anything. Again, it's very flexible. Whatever you're feeling is what you can run. Alright, let's get into playstyles and gameplay tips. This build is fairly aggressive, but it gets away with being so because When you're in the thick of fights, stuff just won't be shooting at you. But if you're not being proactive with blind, this build can feel a bit fragile. But if you play it right, and that blind will make fights feel almost unfair from how little you can get shot. So the way I like to start fights is before I've even shot a bullet, use Ascension to give me Amplified. That'll give me all the benefits that come with that subclass verb, but also set me up straight away by activating frequencies and beacons requirements for Amplified. Then get either an arc weapon kill or throw a flashbang into a group of ads, then close the gap and start punching with Disorienting. Once your class ability is back up, ascend, get the melee resets, and repeat for the next group of ads. One thing that you should try to be doing as well is spending your bulk charge. If you do a good job in doing so, there'll be cases where from all the bulk charge melee regen, which is 2.5% per bulk charge stack, and the Ionic Traces, which will give you 12.5% energy back on pickup, you won't always have to rely on gamblers to reset your melee. It can just get charged back itself. Remember also that uncharged melees can trigger the lightning strike, so if your ability broke, a plain fist does the job too. For ability tips, if you're going Arc Staff and facing down a big healthy target, always try get your palm strike combo of light, light, heavy. It's a bootload of damage on the last heavy attack, but that final strike will also blind anything hit by it. Same thing goes for the heavy slam from the air, it'll blind anything hit by it. Ascension can also be used to jolt targets during super, so you've got really efficient ways to deal with both overloads and unstops. It's also worth noting dodges during Arc Staff don't cost ability energy, but will still trigger the melee reset of Gambler's Dodge, so always try and land a melee before going into super, and as long as you dodge during your super or use Ascension at some point, it'll technically be a free reset. Right, guns to look out for. You'll want Arc, specifically Arc Specials and Arc Heavies. Primaries don't work with beacons, so it's kind of got to be that way. Again, the only time beacons comes off is if I'm using one of these, but Arc Special Heavy with beacons is by far my preference. Luckily though, Arc Exotics in the Special and Heavy slot are really good. My favourites have been Cloud Strike, Delicate Tomb, Edge of Concurrence, Arc Ergo Sums, or Exterus, and some heavies that I've really liked using have been Queensbreaker and Thunderlord. Pretty much, if there's an exotic that has synergy with Jolt or Blind, it's what I recommend. For weapon archetypes, they're flexible, but one thing I will say is that guns that can land a lot of hits make stacking up bulk charge much easier. Things like Lost Signal are amazing at this, so not a requirement for the build, but weapons that hit lots are nicer. I can't also vouch for this always being in the game, but Ascension will also fully inherit the perk of any sword you're holding when using Ascension. Kind of a fun thing to mess around with whilst it's still in the game. And it's also worth noting that if you plan on using Gifted Conviction in this build, the little bouncing balls that come out of Ascension also inherit the perks of the swords. As for perks on these guns, anything that plays off melee hits is nice, so Trench Barrel is great, 1-2 Punch is surprisingly good here, in that it'll also be buffing the AoE that Disorienting now does. But a lot of the ability regen perks here are great. Rolling Storm has nice synergy too, in that it gets boosted when amplified. Otherwise, Volt Shot's nice in that it's got synergy with flow states, and apart from those, anything else you're feeling will do. For your mod setup, on the helmet take Harmonic Siphon, then Special and Heavy Finder. On the arms you can go either double Impact Induction and Heavy Handed, or double Heavy Handed and 1 Impact Induction. On the chest, take either Resist mods or Harmonic Reserves and 1 Charged Up. Legs are stacks on stacks, 1 Recuperation and 1 Innovation. And Cloak is special finisher to let us use beacons more often, then Powerful Attraction and Reaper. For stat priority, go Resilience, then Mobility, but this only has to be at 50 due to Amplify giving a passive 50 mobility, then Discipline. Hold up, it's me but from the future. My voiceover for this video was done before Edge of Fate stat reveals, so I'm adding this in because we've got a whole new system that's coming that are going to affect builds in a big way. I recommend going and reading up or watching up on the new stat system, but the TLDR, stats now go to 200. For things that affect abilities, so class, grenade, melee and super, below 70 is worse regen than what we have now, 70 is on par, and up to 100 is way better than what we've got now. From 100 to 200, you'll see no regen bonuses, but you will get bonus effects. This also is hitting every type of regen, so chunk scalers like Dynamo for example, and bonus regen that you might get from something like flow states get increased alike. For this build, you need 70 melee, as that's the threshold for getting a full melee charge back from gamblers. Then I'd recommend 100 class, as this will make Ascension and Disorienting more spammy, and from there I'd stick 100 in Grenade, and the rest into Super. I don't like making recommendations without actually having tested this stuff, but it's what I'm imagining will be good, so take this with a grain of salt. And in the future, the stat section will be much more developed than what I can do here at the moment, and be more informed from being able to actually test how this stuff feels. Anyway, back to me from the past. And artifact mods. Kind of splitting this one between this episode and Edge of Fate's artifacts. If you're watching in its Heresy, you've got some amazing picks here. Overclock and Load, Dielectric, Photonic Flare, Elemental Siphon, Flashover, and Limit Break. Then tack on other neutral game artifacts here to help round out the setup. If you're watching this during Edge of Fate, there's unfortunately not as much good stuff here, but still some good stuff. Elemental Benevolence will give you class ability energy when you give allies an elemental buff, which you can do consistently with Ascension's Amplified. Refresh Threads on picking up a super matching elemental pickup, so Ionic Traces through Discharge and Ions, or maybe even exotics like Delicate Tomb, will give you ability energy for your lowest charged ability. In the fourth column, we've got Elemental Daze, where I'm stunning a champ with an elemental debuff, you'll cause an elemental explosion that deals damage and applies an elemental debuff. What these debuffs are going to be though, we'll just have to wait and see. Then Elemental Coalescence is another, where on getting kills, you'll spawn in a super matching elemental pickup. I'm not sure what the kill requirement amount will be here, so again, we'll just have to wait and see. In the last column, we've got Shield Crush, which does this, but Amplified is the keyword we have access to mostly, so you'll only really be benefiting from this part. Otherwise, Elemental Overdrive is the last one, where on picking up an elemental pickup, you'll gain increased weapon damage for matching elemental weapons. Again, this build makes a good amount of Ionic Traces, so this can get proc quite easily. And that's that. I hope this build is one you enjoy. It felt really nice to express a different playstyle on Arc, other than combination blow heavy playstyles, and I was really happy with how strong this has been performing. If you need proof of that, I'll link down below some solo jams I've done with the setup, but I reckon if you just go and use this out in the wild, you'll see it's got some real power behind it. Anyway, I'm off to go test the Titan build I've been cooking up, so that's about it from me. See ya.